Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Sever7, and today we are checking out the Invictus Z1. And that's with the ultimate goal of seeing if it's worth adding to your collection or a daily carry. Now, this knife did come from the Lefty Pass-Around group. I do not get to keep it, and after this review, it will go back to the Lefty Pass-Around group. So, the brand Invictus is a brand that was invented by Mini Katana. So they make anime katanas, they make real katanas, and they're all relatively affordable. Well, they decided to branch out and make a knife brand, and that brand is Invictus. And this is one of their flagship knives in that lineup. So first impressions right out of the gate, the knife's okay, right? It's got some carbon fiber. They've got some milling designs around the scale. And I'm not sure if I look at this kind of like gas station knifey because I know it's from Mini Katana and I know that they're new at knives, or if I actually think it's a little gas station-y. I'm not entirely sure. But looking at the facts, we have lots of hardware, right? We've got screw, pivot, button, screw, pivot. So there's a lot of hardware on here, and I think it clutters up the look a little bit. I could overlook all of it, though. The one thing that drives me crazy is because this is a handsome aesthetic right here. Whenever I flip it open, though, this tab, like if you just took that away, look at that. It's like night and day. Much more handsome profile. So that's really the only gripe I have about the aesthetics of the knife. I mean, everything else, the hardware, carbon fiber and stuff like that, I could deal with that, but it's really just how this flipper tab sticks out. And I feel like if that were gone and we had a top flipper or something that disappeared in the open position, I feel like this knife would be a lot more handsome. We do have a T8 hardware for most of the body and the pivot. Then we have T6 for the inlays, which is fine. Then we have T6 for the pocket clip, which is kind of a bummer. This is a deep carry reversible pocket clip, so it will be lefty friendly. And it's a flipper tab button lock, so it is fully ambidextrous, which means lefties will have no problem at all carrying this knife if they choose to. We do have two standoffs. And what's interesting is that these standoffs are actually milled. Let's see if I can get it in the light here. Yeah, if you look real closely, you can see that they're ribbed, which is interesting. And that is something overall that's pretty interesting about this knife, is they got some of the details, some of the important stuff right. Like having milled backspacers. That's pretty cool. It's not something you see very often. The deep carry reversible pocket clip, also very cool. Not something that we see nearly as often as we'd like to. But then the things that aren't right are going to be like the ergonomics. All right, this thing's got a couple of hot spots. And I want to say that's mostly because, well, they knocked down in here. You see hopefully you can see it. They knocked down in here, they gave it a chamfer. Whenever you get down here, there's no chamfering, it's not even cut out, it's just sharp, right? So some of these smaller things, it seems like they missed, but then they milled the backspacers, right? So it's a little bizarre, but what I'll say is, you know, I think if they continue to improve upon this formula, because clearly they're willing to put the work in, right? If they're paying attention to details like that. I mean, they put a ton of milling in this. They did the backspacers, you know, they try to give a good flipper tab. So I definitely think there's potential here for improvement, but you know, as it sits right now, I think this knife needs a good amount of work put into it before it's going to be like a standout. You know, especially considering the price tag, which we'll talk about here in just a second. Now, as far as the weight goes, it's light. It feels fine, easy to manipulate. You've got a pinch-up spot here, kind of like a trigger pull pinch-up. So you have plenty of control over the knife and what it does. As far as the blade shape, we have a classic drop point. We have a swedge. I'm not sure if I want to say it's handsome. I think it's bizarre that it dips down right here. And I almost wish this was a fuller instead. That way you would have the ability to reverse flick off the blade. But in this case, you can't. The only deployment you have outside of the button is going to be that flipper tab. We have a bead blast finish on the blade, a flat grind, and M390 blade steel. I will say one thing that I was super pumped about is they actually listed the HRC on the website at 62. It wasn't a range. It was straight up HRC 62. And 62 on M390 is pretty fan-freaking-tastic. That means you're going to get a lot of work out of your blade. It might not be optimized perfectly. I think optimized would be like 63, 64. Double check me on that. But I know that 62 is darn good. Hell of a lot better than 59 to 61, right? So if they actually hit 62 HOC, then this knife becomes a whole lot more recommendable, despite some of some of the quirks with it. Now, as far as the action goes, the detent is soft. I can fail it. I do have to try to fail it, but I can fail it, right? And typically we want it to be as soon as we break the detent, the knife fires out, right? But with this one, it's a little soft. So I would like to see an improved detent. Typically with knives like this, because you can see like their button travel on the inside, it's not very, it doesn't travel very far, which means you're not getting a lot of force to put into it. Typically what I would do is I would get a spring that's got tighter compression, and I would put that in there, and that would strengthen the detent and give me more satisfying deployment. But I actually can't take this knife apart, and I tried. I hit it with the blow dryer, tried to melt the glue, nothing worked. It's a non-captive pivot, which means both sides spin, and with the amount of force I'd have to apply to break the glue, I would more likely end up stripping the pivot screws. So I can't take it apart and make any adjustments, which is kind of a bummer, but you know, it is what it is. I guess they don't want to deal with customers calling back in saying, hey, I took my knife apart and I don't know what to do. So I get that. As far as the acoustics go, the acoustics are super satisfying on the open and the close. So I really enjoy that. The close is going to be your standard guillotine. Just drop shut. That's pretty typical of button locks, because as soon as you disengage the lock, there's no friction, right? So it just free falls. It's not, it doesn't have to push against anything, or there's no lock bar providing tension to it that it has to, you know, overcome. Just drop shut. Some people like that, some people don't. For me personally, I prefer a more controlled drop, but that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. There's no lock bar to access because it is a plunge lock. So you just push that button and your flipper tab, and that is going to be it. Now, this knife is lefty friendly. You can deploy it. There's no lock bar to get hung up on. The only difference is whenever you push the button in, you're going to push it in with your index finger instead of your thumb, which I actually prefer. I think the index finger feels a little more natural, so I don't have any problem with that at all. As far as the overall length, we're looking at 7.68 inches, a blade length of 3.5, and an overall weight of 4.1 ounces. The blade to handle ratio on this is 69%, or 0.69. We really want to see it at 80% so we can get the illusion of a 1-to-1 ratio. But in this case, we can see very clearly that the blade is taken up between, well, it's like a third. right? It's about a third of the knife. So, you know, very clearly off in blade to handle ratio. You can also tell because whenever you look down here, you can see that we've got about half an inch of space where the blade could be longer. It's just not, right? And that's a huge pet peeve of mine. I really like the Shirogorov look where, you know, you look and it's almost like, man, could I poke myself? Can I? And I like that. With this though, there's no way. It doesn't matter what you do. You can't get anywhere near that tip. So, kind of a bummer. If they took the handle and dropped it to like right here, they could probably take a 1/4 inch or so off the bottom and we'd still be perfectly fine. Do a quick size comparison. We're gonna put the, so of course all of my knives disappeared. Give me 1 second, let me go grab a couple. All right, sorry about that. So first we're going to do the Kubi Verajero. And then next we're going to do the Remet Wild Species. All right, so it's not a terribly large knife, but you can kind of see what I'm talking about with the blade to handle ratio. How with the Kubi, we cut off right here. Whereas with this, we have all this extra like bolster kind of covering up the blade. And then it's the same story with the Remet Wild Species. See our blades down here, so we have, you know, that much extra cutting space. But also the bolster doesn't go anywhere near as high. The bolster for this cuts off right here. This has like another 1/2 inch up that it goes. So you can kind of see the blade to handle ratio that I'm talking about. And these two aren't even perfect, right? I think these two could both stand to have a little bit longer of a blade or a shorter handle. And they're still doing better than this as far as that blade to handle ratio goes, if that makes sense. I'm sure it does. You guys aren't dumb. So what's the price on this bad boy? This knife comes in at $229. Now, would I carry this? You know, well, the knife is fine. The soft action and the poor blade to handle ratio would stop me from carrying it. But, you know, for the time that I did carry it and use it, the knife was perfectly fine. I didn't have any issues with it. If this is something that you like, then by all means, pick it up. You know, especially at 62 HRC, you know, you can get a lot of use and a lot of life out of this blade. And for some people, the good HRC alone is going to be enough to justify the cost, regardless of the look or the action, right? And that's fine. You know, if you have demanding tasks throughout the day and that HRC is really important to you, then by all means. For me personally, though, I know that I can get miles out of a 60 or 61 HRC simply because I'm not doing anything crazy with my knives, right? I'm cutting boxes, I'm cutting paper, and, you know, if I need to strop, you know, a little more often, I'm okay with that, as long as I enjoy everything else about the knife. So that's about it for this one. Drop a comment below and let me know, is this knife, does it have a spot in your daily carry? Does it have a spot in your rotation? And if it does, this knife is going to be linked below at the best possible price I can find. And if you want more reviews like this, hit the like button, subscribe, and follow me on Instagram at SEVRSEVN. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.